Oh.
No, we just had a long conversation about Obama's speech today, so I'm kind of
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think Brian, some other people are waiting for us, as far as I understand.
Okay, well, we should be available. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening?
So
I don't know.
We're just. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We're just waiting on Maggie, whom I think is going to make her way in as she's able, and we have Brian joining us, who's the person with the blue shirt and the headphones.
Hi.
Hi.
What? Okay, just a second. They're just shenanigans.
It's called a feedback loop.
So we've set up in the kitchen, if you see this right here, that's Michelle's computer in the kitchen for introductions if you want to, like I think that was a great suggestion.
Interjection!
Yeah, exactly. So that, because we have a number of folks who are here live at RATS9, and they expressed after the last communication that it would be nice if there was a way for them to be able to enter and ask questions and not have to go through Michelle or I. So we've set up that a little interjection spot for them. Yeah, but I think otherwise we shall continue on. Does that feel good?
I do have to leave at 3 p.m. my time, which would be like in half an hour.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I think, I mean, I think it's evident that this is an entirely experimental thing that who knows what it is or how it works. And, you know, in that way, it's leaky. It's not evident the time frame or the movement of the things. And I think going as you need to go is totally fine. I really appreciate the heads up. Does everybody feel okay with that as a leaky?
Let's go.
Okay, TEENA. TEENA has a question for everybody that she's dying to ask.
What? Who?
You.
Me?
Don't you? You said you did. So this, oh yeah, Brian, can you introduce
Yes? Sure. Wow. So there's so many wonderful sound events happening that it's difficult to get a handle on what's happening. But I believe I was asked to introduce myself. Can I receive some kind of affirmation that people can hear me?
Yes.
Good. So I'm Brian McCorkle of the Panoply Performance Laboratory. My partner Esther Neff wanted to be here very badly, but unfortunately today is the day of her sister's wedding shower, which is an event I don't fully understand, but she has to be there, and there's no way getting out of it, and it's unfortunate. So she can't be here, but she sends her regards. She sends her regards.
Send my condolences.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, TEENA. And so I'm Brian McCorkle. I was going to be here anyway, so I'm here as well, without Esther. I run the Panoply Performance Laboratory, co-director with Esther Neff, and we host all sorts of events, and we also have been doing organizing and our own artistic work for about a decade now. We operate in a post-product donation-based economy here in Brooklyn, New York, and yeah, I'm really interested to hear what all of you have had to say and have to say. So thank you for allowing me to come late. See, that's amazing. That's the kind of sonic event I was talking about. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty. Your optimism is a pleasure for me.
This sound is time traveling, by the way.
Who were trying to ask us a question?
Yes. Tina, did you have a question or no?
I don't even know who I'm talking to. Who are the two guys with the amazing painting in between them?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry they weren't here when you came. You guys want to introduce your names?
Well, we're from Buenos Aires, Ivo and Juan, and well, we explained a lot of the project an hour ago. But basically, we are working together. He has been running for about 6 years for an art space with many disciplines. And I'm working now with him developing the educative project in visual arts. Basically, that's the main frame. We just started collaborating a few months ago, but well, we're learning a lot for your experience. That's it.
Oh, cool. And Bertrand, who's here in States.
I'll just read it.
Yeah, you can relay it.
Okay. I'm just wondering, just one question to people who's responsible for the educational process.
Yeah, that's it.
Have you delegated this particular role to this person with specific funding programs, or is this something, this impulse to have educational programs stems from your artistic practice?
So the question that Anne asks is for Fábrica, and whether you've been delegated or assumed the role of an educational facilitator related to funding requirements, or because it's related to your artistic practice, or through another way. Yeah.
Was it for because there's a funding program available for this kind of activity?
Is it because there's a particular funding program that's available for this kind of activity?
It's the activity in this place, the educational activity in this place is really recent, but basically it's a kind of experimental courses space in which almost the half or the students pay for the class, and the other half are colleagues.
Yeah.
Another artist that wants to receive the information and experience that the artist wants to share. That's basically the frame right now, and what they pay right now. It's being used for buying a projector for making the space, the activity possible. That's that's the situation of the space. But we are working right now on the writing of the project, and about to work with cultural administration, gestión cultural. Well, with people who I'm an artist and also dictate courses and organizing all this, but it's not my main intention to become how do you say, a manager or all that. It's just a need for more proper context for developing the activity, the cultural activity, the art of my generation, which it doesn't really exist right now. It only belongs to a kind of MFA, which is not an MFA, but it's as privative as an MFA. and another cultural spaces which are run by another generation and more related with social academy and not specifically with what it's really happening in the art scene. So that's the main. I don't know if I really answered the question.
Yeah, so you're saying it's a source of revenue. It generates revenue.
It's sorry.
It generates revenue.
Yeah. Yep. A little. Just a little.
A little money is more than no money.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
I'm curious too for Whippersnapper, guys, because I remember like there was this year that passed where, if I understand correctly, your funding was pulled, or for whatever reason, like you didn't get your funding, and so you generated programming in this other way. Like you did all these conversation meetings that were really amazing. Are there? Yeah, that's not correct?
That's not correct. But it was at a time when we were transitioning from like kind of one generation of organizers to the next.
Okay.
And so there was like 3 months where we didn't have any programming organized for the space just because of like the handoff and work that went into that. So instead of letting our space sit dormant, we just let people, we essentially like put a key box and let anybody use it for any reason. Like meeting, it was called the discussion den, so the idea was for discussions, but it was like really just anybody can use the space for anything. Yeah. And
with Maggie, I was reading this like really totally fascinating article that I know is in process, but I think it's super, super important that that Maggie's written about questions of funding, being an artist-run center or like on the edge of being an artist-run center sometimes, and Whippersnapper. And I know, like in that, you specifically commented on the ways in which like educational programming and then having like 4 to 6 exhibitions a year and to check off for the grantors has become this kind of standardized way of doing things in Canada for artist-run centers as you are finding it. And I'm wondering if there's ways in which Whippersnapper also like that you mobilize, okay, this is the educational portion, this is that portion, in order to relate to funding and pull that money in.
For sure, yeah. I mean, obviously we always have to translate it back to the funders in one way or another, but I think that one of the things, like we haven't really kind of ever created a template for what our programming looks like, and because we've had many organizers come in and out over the years, and we were working more collectively. Like it didn't even have like a predetermined staff structure that people's roles would fall into. So it just meant that we were like the way that programming was generated was not for like any specific conventional series of boxes, but just what we felt like doing. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. What are you holding up, Tina?
What is this? On parle pas German.
What does that mean?
Brian knows German.
But I can't see what you're holding up, though, Tina.
You cannot see or you can see?
I cannot. Ah, there it is. There it is. Maxi Wanda und irgendwie träume ich davon, ein neues Leben zu beginnen. What does that mean? Oh man. I don't know. My German's not good enough to translate that quickly, Tina.
All right. And somehow I'm dreaming of starting a new life. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
But is that where you're at with your space right now?
Sorry, what?
Is that where you're at with your space right now? Or is that that's an interjection?
That was a poem that was written about 150 years ago.
But in terms of your own situation, is that how you feel? Are you dreaming of starting a new life with Grüntaler?
No, I think it's not time for that yet, but there's definitely a kind of a transition that has started, because since we are talking about payment, maybe I can briefly give a little info about the situation here. So basically, there's no funding for artist-run project spaces here. The only thing that came up within the last 2 years in Berlin is something called the Project Space Award, which is given out to 7 spaces out of approximately 150 that apply every year. And my space hasn't received it yet, unfortunately. But as you know, one should think positive and keep applying. So that's what I'm doing. Huh?
Nothing. I just don't. I'm not into the think positive and keep applying model. I think we're fucked through granting, and I think if we rely on it, I'm just watching things crumble. So.
Okay.
Continue,
okay.
But that's my projection.
I'd like to know what is
well, the thing is, keeping positive and applying doesn't mean that your next rent is paid. So this is just one layer of many. I mean, you still have to keep going, doing a program that you consider quality, but then at the same time pay your bills. And I'm repeating something now that all of us know, so I don't want to actually get into this conversation now. The only thing that I realize is that all the things I am doing at the moment are somehow aiming for sustaining and maintaining a space that the only thing I get paid there, let's say, maybe 50% is I get paid with respect, and that is maybe sometimes something that you cannot really measure. That you just get it.
Wait, can you talk about what you mean when you say respect? Because my reaction is very strong to that.
Let's say appreciation. Does that sound better?
By who?
I'm not talking in terms of ego. I'm not talking in terms of ego now. I'm talking in terms of that I see what I'm doing there with the space and the way I care about the space. And I'm not talking about the actual architectural space now. I'm talking about the things that are happening there, the encounters, the people, the caregiving, the time we spend there together. And I feel that 50% of the things that are happening there are appreciated. And this is what I am getting, how do I say that in English? That's my payment at the moment.
Yeah.
Is that understandable?
So do you have another job? How do you pay your rent? Do you have another job? How do you pay your rent?
Because I do other projects in other institutions, and the money I get for that all goes into the space.
So you're self-financing?
I'm self-exploiting, yes.
Did you have a question, Anne? This doesn't feel like a good moment. Okay. I mean, for me, this is bringing up a memory of when I was speaking with Brian and Esther in Brooklyn last week, and talking about the ways in which people start relating to us differently when they perceive like that you have access to a space, which I think in my context is often interpreted as translating into some kind of power, in the sense of like determining who's given support and who's not given support. And I think that's not necessarily true in all contexts, but that's how it feels for me here. I don't know if you'd agree. And the ways in which I find this really non-productive because it turns everything into a kind of competition space. Catherine Baudemer was talking about, we've just recently had a 2.5 million cut this week in our arts budget, and she was talking about the way that this promotes cannibalism. And I think it's something to think of it this way, the ways in which we feel we can or can't support each other, whether we have those abilities or not, but the feeling of those and the way that generates something. I don't know, Brian, if you want to speak to that, because I know that in your context you also don't have funding. It feels quite similar in a way to the Berlin context that Tina's talking about in terms of funding. But there's also this like really cutthroat energy in New York.
Absolutely, and I do. I have found that I can both relate to what Tina is saying and to what you're saying, which I think is almost identical in terms of the power dynamics as in Tina's case as payment. Though I certainly wouldn't say that that's our mission statement in terms of running the space. But let me see if I can focus here. So I think there are two issues, the issue of being self-financed versus funding, or how to secure funding, and then the issue of power paradigms within participants, either participants as artists or participants as audience members. So those are both pretty complicated things. I think I'm going to ask my question, which has to do with both of them, and perhaps in the asking of the question, I will find something for both to respond to the prompt and to prompt a response from you. So at the moment, Esther and I are working with high schoolers through a program in New York that pays high schoolers to work at a job, to learn a skill. And so we've partnered with Momenta Art to do this. And part of the question that we're running into is that our funding was also cut here in New York, although in this case the consequence of that is that the Momenta did not receive a grant they usually receive. And so we've been talking about the idea of having students pay to be part of the class, and then alongside students who are being paid to be part of the class. And I guess I'm wondering, in part from my pondering of this question, if anyone has noticed in their own educational programs, be they self-financed or otherwise, whether participants paying or not paying causes tension in an educational situation among those participants, whether it's actually a problem to have people, for example, like the Buenos Aires space, like having some people who taking the class for free and some who are paying. That makes sense. I've also made this.
Mainly here, what happened in even in the course I dictate, the half of the students paid, and the other half isn't paid, of course, for assistant to class. Kind of an utopia for us to make that possible. And it will be wonderful, but mostly it isn't that they're not paid, but there's some kind of another kind of transaction. For instance, if I need a translation, that's what we do. There's a lot of ways to be paid for that. And sometimes even we ask some partners which are in somehow a same level, same educative level, if something like that could be possible, or at least we had studied together, for instance, and that participation raises the level of the course and makes the minimum level, guarantees a minimum level of activity in the course. If I have a course, I couldn't have a course with as I have 4 students paying, the motivation will be very low. But I have a course with 8 students, and so it rises, and even because of that wealth, some more people is coming to the course. That's the state of things in the most of the course that we are organizing. We are just in an initial phase, which is establishing the level and consolidating proposals. I don't know if it will be like that in the future, but probably it will keep that. Mostly the courses are based on researches or personal researches of the artist. Most of them are the first or the second course we are dictating. So that's a kind of invitation to get into the universe of that artist, of the artist which is dictating the course. So well, that's how it works here now, at least. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That's yeah. I missed part of it because the connection here isn't so good. But it's the first time I've heard of a class that uses this model, which is something I was just considering. So thanks. That's why that was my question. Does anyone else in the group had experience with that kind of educational situation of there being an inequality among the people participating? I mean, I think that having yeah, because your model sounds really fun, but I mean, I guess I'm really good.
We don't have any educational programming at the at VIVA. It's not part of what we do or have done. But it's interesting because I find it really difficult to speak to your experience because we live in such a different context here, even though we're geographically quite close. My instinct would be to say, like, actually, no, that is fucked up. Like, that is that could cause tensions, and that could create I mean, it inherently creates a hierarchy between who's accessing knowledge and how they're accessing knowledge. And I'm sort of interested in the middle ground, like the people who can't get paid to go and the people who can't afford to go. Like these, you know, it creates a sort of gap in potential participation and audience or public, however you want to sort of define that. But again, like, I don't think I can inform, or I don't think that I'm in a position in any way to speak to the decisions you have to make as an organization, because maybe that's just like a survival strategy, and maybe within that survival strategy, these types of situations, and I think maybe like it raises a sort of broader issue that interests me, which is this idea of like, how much do we compromise or how much do we negotiate to be able to continue doing what we're doing, and when do we draw that line, whether it be ethical or otherwise, because I think it's a slippery slope, right? And it's a slippery slope because compromises are small increments, but those add up to eventually potentially end up in a space that's quite radically different from where you actually want to be or intend to be. But at the same time, if the opposite is, well, just shut down and you can't have any educational programming or no one can access that, then is that actually better? Or is, so I guess I'm sort of like curious as to, if you are as an organization at Panoply uncomfortable with this sort of dilemma or this decision, then what kind of like parallel steps can be made to try to alleviate the potential of finding yourself in a similar ethical dilemma in the future? So looking at it,
right?
Yeah.
So let me be clear that this was a proposal made by someone I was working with that I actually talked them out of for the very reasons you're describing. So Yes, absolutely. Panoply Performance Laboratory itself, when we have educational programming, it's usually either we have some kind of agreement with the teacher where it's a donation-based class and the teacher gets to keep the donations, or if they would like to give us part of their donations that they've received, that's great, obviously. But we make it a point to, and it sounds like you do too, with your work at your space at Viva, we make it a point to keep our space open to that middle part that you were talking about. Not someone who can't afford the money to patronize a space, but also not someone who can afford necessarily to patronize a space. We're looking to make the space available for people who have great ideas and want to realize them. And of course, I think part of the power that TEENA was talking about is in having the authority or assuming the authority to decide on the quality of ideas and to decide to support certain ideas. In terms of parallel strategies for sustaining organization, our answer to that is that we live at our space. So if we pay rent, we can keep operating. And it's a very unique situation with its own dilemmas, certainly.
Yeah, I think this is the model of a number of US platforms that I've known about. Like when I was a student about 10 years ago, there was a space in Philadelphia called the Black Floor Gallery, and it had a similar model, so the people were living in the space, and it was sort of like a co-op, and they collectively agreed that their rent would go towards having this gallery space, that they also had chores, like a chore wheel, like doing the dishes, installing the exhibition was part of their chore wheel. And so, yeah, and it's interesting too, because how long's Panoply been around for? I don't actually, a lot of people have talked about you, and so I know about your organization sort of through great word of mouth, but I don't actually know any of the sort of facts about it. Frozen. I was like, is he asleep? Did he fall asleep?
I think it was frozen.
Hi, Brian. Can you hear us? Brian?
Hi, I'm back. Sorry, I got kicked off.
We lost Brian.
Yes.
Did you hear Michelle's question, or no, not at all?
I didn't. I got kicked off.
Then how long
Sorry.
have you been running?
Can you?
5 guys. Thank you. I was going to talk to you. Yeah. Receiving.
Are you there? I was just wondering how long Panoply has been running for under this specific model of you guys paying rent and it enabling this space to exist.
A little over 2.5 years.
Okay, fresh.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Don't be sorry.
Guys, I really have to go. I'm sorry, but thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Bye. Bye.
Really nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I mean, I feel like, sorry to turn the things a little bit, but I feel like there's, for me, something that's really interesting in the gathering that's here are that there's like pretty much half and half of those that run with funding and those that don't. And for me, a constant tension, and this is very context specific, certainly, and like we've talked about this in the question of a timeline and time limits for things that are unfunded. But really the question of whether to continue things is often something I ask. Yeah, and I feel like Maggie, I've heard you talk about this too. I'm not sure, but I don't think that longevity is a ruler that I find to be necessarily productive. I also think that continuity can be very important for a community, for a feeling, for a space to cultivate a certain kind of work, especially in something like performance art, especially for me in Montreal, where we have a lot of like dance spaces, no performance spaces, and so this means that we're often just, or I'm often just working with dancers, which it's okay, but it's not my work.
Now that there's no dancers in the room.
No, but see, I talk to dancers about this all the time, and I get a lot of flack because they take it as an offensive thing. It's like, dude, if you were only ever working with jazz artists, at some point you'd be like, I don't make jazz. Yeah, I just do the wave. I just do the wave all the time. Tina's doing drag in the corner. All right. Yeah, so the question, yeah, what is your relationship to the question of whether the things that you run should continue, and how do you justify continuing?
Yeah, so to give everyone a bit of context, VIVA is funded. We're primarily project funded, which means we apply for grants and then get chunks of money. We also have a small operating grant with the city, which is about $10,000 a year. We're not a space. We have no rent. We have I'm the only sort of staff.
But you have rent for the duration of the festival.
Yeah, we rent for the duration of the festival, which is about a week or 2 weeks with install and takedown and stuff. I was brought on specifically. Sorry, Tina, I'm a bit redundant because I talked to you about this. I was brought in specifically to try to guide the platform through a period of transition towards growth and sustainability. And by sustainability and growth, I don't necessarily mean like economic growth, but just stable funding. So when you're project funding, you're developing projects, you're getting confirmations from artists, the funding doesn't happen, then you sort of are still committed to the project, but you don't have the money. It's weird. You have to. And it's not a very fair process for the artists and participants. They're trying to get out of that model towards something that's a bit more stable. And it's gotten worse. It's not gotten better. So I'm now writing twice as many grants as I did in 2011 to get just the same amount of money, if not a bit less. And so this year we almost shut down because we've made a decision internally, which was a very difficult decision because we're run in partnership with a number of partnering centers who have a sort of investment in the platform, although it's not necessarily, it's financial during the event, but it's not financial really otherwise. And there was a lot of resistance, but I think it's interesting because people who started the festival, so the founders and the people who were involved at the beginning, which is not me, but I was a volunteer at the early times, said, yeah, we shut down before we compromise. We don't keep going if people aren't getting paid. We don't keep going if we can't give artists the conditions that we've committed to giving them, which aren't unfair because, yeah, we treat them well for a week, but after that they go back to their lives where they have 1 or 2 or more jobs. They're working in performance, so they're often not getting paid for the work they're doing internationally. So we have a privilege here in Canada to access funding to give them conditions that are superior or beyond what they can usually access for a very short amount of time. So why am I talking about this? Why do we shut down? So we're in this discussion now internally because we've been in a waiting line for funding on a provincial level for 3 years, top of the list, and there's no new money coming in. So the question is, how long do we stay in line? Because in the meantime, if we recognize that we're in a space of transition, that space of transition necessitates either transitioning to something or ending, because if that becomes the actual culture that we're in and sustaining, shut that shit down. So we've reapplied for our second round to either get provincial funding or to hold our place in the waiting line. And if we hold our place in the waiting line, which is statistically what's probably going to happen because they've just announced additional cuts to our program, then we have to make a difficult decision, which is either to radically retransform the festivals so that we can operate with $10,000 a year exclusively, or we shut down.
Which 10,000 is like a third of your operating budget?
It's a fifth of our operating budget. So about we make about a fifth of our budget through through operational grants, which is a recurring grant. We make 3/5 of it through punctual projects, which are often linked to, like this visiting artist and thing, and this, it's like micro, you like piece together amounts based on committing to other projects that allow you to get money for general operating costs. And then we have a fifth of it is from fundraising during the event. So which is, we don't sell beer, we don't sell tickets for the festival, everything's free, but we sell beer, which is good and delicious and people love it. And we sell dinner. So we have a community kitchen for the duration of the festival, which feeds all the artists and volunteers and participants for free. and then people from the public can come and eat a meal with us for $8, and that generates income for the platform. So it's interesting because we're asking these questions, and it's sort of, I evoked it in my response, but it's surprising to me that stopping is harder than going on under shit conditions. And so,
and why is that?
Yeah, I don't know why that is. Because we're attached to it and we love what we're doing, but Bertrand, who just left, has this really beautiful statement at a board meeting when we found out that we got a really major cut from a project source. She was like, there's life after Viva, right? So, and I bring this up just because you talked about community, and I think what happens is we confuse the platforms with the individuals, and the more I've been in this, I realize that institutions are people, and that's because we have partnerships, and some institutions have been really generous and supportive and amazing to work with, and then there's a shift of staff, and that culture changes. And so I think in a lot of ways, I'm reassured to promote the death of organizations or platforms, because I feel like those people will keep operating, and in some ways letting go of the baggage, because as you become institutionalized or you build up a history, you get more pressure, you get more requirements, you get more requests, and so the demand and the workload and the labor becomes heavier. But if the resources aren't matching that, sometimes shutting down is a good way of like just clearing the slate, because those people will keep doing awesome things in their community. But I think we have a lot of confusion between platforms and individuals. Yeah, and it's a shame because fuck, good stuff is what's getting cut, right? It's not like the stuff that's not. It's not the money isn't going to the right places, but at the same time, like if you're committing to working in shit conditions, those conditions are just going to get worse with the pretext of assuming that you're working towards making them better. I have a finger wave.
I have an understanding question. Because of the financial cut that you mentioned, you said you had to do collaborations with so-called centers. Is that meant to be like cultural institutions, or what is that? I don't understand the term center.
Yeah, so the partnering centers are artist-run centers, so they're non-for-profit gallery spaces that are funded.
Okay.
Funding.
Okay, so this is what we call project space here. Okay.
Yeah, and they funded, so the first year of Viva in 2006, they pooled their money and did it, so Viva had no funding. They just pooled their resources and did it. And then as the festival's gone on, the contribution of those partnering centers has shifted as new staff has come in or the relationship to the platform has changed. And this vision that Viva is now an entity in and of itself. And it's interesting because one of the obstacles we had is, so this year we can't get money for the actual platforms. Like I can't pay my technicians, I can't pay my communications people. Like this is the money we're having. I can get money for an artist, I can get money for education, I can get money for a lot of shit around the needs of the festival, but to get money for the oh my god, this cat. But to get money for the real boring shit, you know, like paying people and paying rent, that's gotten really hard. And it's interesting because of the framework of the partnerships, basically the partners support artists. So they'll pay for their travel, they'll pay for their accommodations, they'll pay for their artist fee, and then
where do they get the money from?
They have more stable funding because they've been for 18 or 30 years, so they're on operational. They have recurring funds every year. But it's interesting because for them to be able to support us, they need to generate programming. So for instance, we have a partnering center that's one of the best funded centers in Montreal, and their artists had to flush. They can't come in the end. Performance, if the body can't come, then the programming doesn't happen. And it's interesting because I was like, shit, we need money for a technician. Like, we need money to pay rent. We haven't had to pay rent in the past because we've squatted this space owned by the city, but it's under renovation for the next 4 years, so we can't use it anymore. So now we have to pay rent for a space. And it's interesting because they can't just give us money for expenses that aren't artist related. So it's like for us to, those partnerships, how can I say it? So it's I'm sort of interested because in Canada the model is shifting towards, and I don't know if Whippersnapper is experiencing this, and I think it relates to Anne's question, that money is linked to these envelopes or projects. So it's really hard to just get money and to be trusted to distribute those monies as your organization needs or sees fit, and more you need to sort of yeah, it's like this seed funding. So you could get like $1,000 here, $2,000 here, but each time you get those $2,000 or those $1,000, you need to add programming. So now you need to have an educational facet, and now you need to have a mediation thing, and now you need to go get at-risk youth, and now you need to, I don't know, like bring in
pregnant teen moms.
Yeah, you know, which is fine if that's what the programming's intention is. But what happens is that we end up doing all these things to be able to fund the core of what we're trying to do, and it's because I think we're not talking about this at all, that like trust is a big issue, and it actually, TEENA, it makes me think when you were talking about respect. Fuck, man, like I feel like it's hard to get people to just trust you to be able to define as an expert in your field what you need and where those funds need to go. And here, yeah, more and more, to get money, you need to respond to something that is sometimes just totally ridiculously distant from what you're doing. You know, so for me to develop an educational program for VIVA for 4 days, and I can't pay a technician who's there for, you know, literally like 10 hours a day, it makes no fucking sense. And that's it makes no sense, you know, like not a culture that I want to build.
Is there any other ways of getting income besides funding or collaboration or selling food?
Yeah, but then this
Sorry, we gotta go.
Sorry, guys.
Goodbye, everybody. It was great.
It's really nice to meet you.
Well, you have to tell us about the poster behind you. Hello. What is that?
It's a painting.
It's a painting?
Yep.
Who's it by?
It's by an artist. It's a resident in our space. It's called Pablo Mosuk.
And it's 3 guys hitting each other?
Yeah, if you look at it carefully, it's 3 times the same guy.
I can't see because one of the guys is basically just blown up.
Yeah, maybe if I turn like...
Is it a suicide bomber?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's hard to tell.
Oh, now I can only see Brian.
It's not a bad sight.
Thank you for having us, then. It was nice.
Thanks for joining. Nice to meet you, Juan.
Yeah, Juan, it's nice to meet you, and it's really cool to hear about your space, and I look forward to interacting further.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are here.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Whatever you need. Yeah.
And the back massage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Come to Berlin.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Ciao.
Bye.
I mean, so I think, TEENA, your question, comment points to something that I also think is really interesting and sticky and important, which is the question of where we take the money from, and the question of, you know, should we take on a music show or a theater model where we simply like require the audience to pay for the work? Do we do like Kickstarter crowdsourcing? But this is really difficult and complicated, and of course very contextually based. Like through the funding system, performance art has been named as something that's of visual arts lineage, and thus like how you expect an audience to be is should be named under a FLYNN lineage in our funding system somehow. But then numbers of people who show up still matter for the grantors. So anyways, it's just, I just want to draw that out further.
Yeah, and it's contextual for me too, because like, fuck it, there's money in Canada for arts, so why shouldn't we be getting it? Like, it's not like there's no, like, no, I'm not going to go ask people to give me money out of their fucking pockets, because we make 1/5 of our revenue that way, and that's more than enough. Like, that's a really great statistic for the Canadian landscape. But there's money all over the fucking city for culture. It's not like there's a lack of funds here. It's that there's problems in the prioritization of how and where those funds are distributed. And I think that our event and our platform and our work is just as valuable and it deserves those funds just as much as like Dude Painter or whatever fucking show, Gas Fest or blah blah blah, because we're having.
I suppose we all agree on that, but then how do you want to make those people who make the decisions? How do you want to make them think the same?
I mean, I guess one of the tactics that I'm really interested in this whole, because I've been talking with Michelle through this moment where Viva was like, fuck, maybe we're going to shut down, which is huge for Montreal. This is huge. Like, that's a massive, I almost cried when I heard that, you know? It was really, it's a big deal. But in fact, even perhaps maybe one of the tactics is this active refusal, and refusal as a modality of demanding attention be paid. To refuse loudly, to shut down in an explosive way, or at least in a way that communicates, not quietly. Maybe this is a modality to do that.
Well, there's an example of parallel. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, my question is just, Michelle, you said that your funding would shrink to 1/5 of what it currently is. So if that happened, do you have some kind of annual funding? Are you on any kind of operating stream?
Yeah, about $10,000. Is it over 10?
Okay. I'll ask more questions about that, but Brian, you say what you were going to say, because that's probably more related.
Well, no, I really hold that thought, please, because I haven't heard you talk very much yet, and I'm really excited to. But I did want to really quick say that we were part of a festival last year called Underground Zero Festival, which has had a lot of funding in the past here in New York, and it recently it received no funding last year. And so they had a zero-budget festival. It was okay. It's a good festival. Paul's a good guy. Which you know, I mean, I definitely do not want to say that you need money to have good art. I don't think that's true. However, what I'm saying is that what ended up happening this year is that they're having the festival again, but not in New York. I'm not entirely sure how this happened, but they relocated to San Francisco, possibly because of the zero budget. I guess what I'm saying is sometimes it seems like it's worth it to do something that you know is important, and that you know is powerful, and that you know is good, regardless of whether you receive the funding that you've been used to having. To me, I don't know anything about Viva, and it sounds wonderful, but to me, $10,000 sounds like enough to, yeah. But I have no conception of how you guys are run. But to me, if I received $10,000 to operate a festival, I know I could do it. I guess.
Okay, so maybe I can jump on there. Maybe I can jump on there.
Please do. Yeah.
Like, pay fair wages to all your employees, though? And could you do it and like pay fees to all your artists? Like.
That's what I'm saying, is that if you're not going to compromise, there are other options. But I think lifestyle is a big thing that I'm really interested to hear more about. Sorry, Maggie, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I'm like asking this exact question for Whippersnapper. We have a moment where we have like, you know, we have 2 paid staff members, myself and Mohammed, for the next 2 years, and then we'll hire somebody in the 3rd year, 2 more people in the 3rd year, and you know, we have like all kinds of ideas about how we might hope to find standing moving forward in the future after this like 3-year burst of funding runs out. But if we don't, what we'll be left with is $9,500 per year guaranteed. If everything, like if all of our efforts totally failed, then we would be left with $9,500 per year. I don't think that's going to happen. Like I'm actually very confident that we can find more sustainable little pieces here and there. But I think that I still wouldn't kill it at $9,500. I'd say, like, okay, we're going to shrink this down so much, but to toss, like, you know, when you're talking, Michelle, about like seeing money going to like other parts, whether it's like within the art scene or whatever, to things that maybe you feel like have more resources or could find money in other ways, like I think it's important to hold on to what resources have been amassed, and then think creatively about like how we can totally start from scratch with that. Because like, so starting from scratch might mean everybody getting used to the fact that Viva is going to look completely different, and there are not going to be technicians, right? Like performance festivals happen all the time without technicians. That maybe there will be 3 artist projects, right? Like 3, that's it, maybe. And like 1 organizer who's paid for 2 months, or not even like 1 month prior to the festival. It means massive shrinking down, but I feel like that is still more useful than just like just saying, okay, let's call it quits. And also, I think that, I mean, I know I've also been hearing like this from another festival in Toronto that is going through some tough times, just like not finding the project funding that they need, really similar situation. And their worry is like, okay, if we don't, they actually expanded the festival this year, I think, even though they had less of a budget than they normally do, because they were so worried about the funders, what the funders thought, in their funders' perception of like the work that they're doing. But then there's like this question of like quantity, and can you deliver the same quality? So I think it's like silly to assume what are, in the end, pure juries, like what people are going to want from us as organizations. Like, we should just do whatever the fuck we can do with the little bit that we have. And if, you know, after Viva attempts to run for, like, say 5 years on a $10,000 per year budget, the community is like, oh, it's not relevant anymore because they basically can't do anything. They can only do 3 tiny projects in 1 week per year, and then like that decides, like so then the council decides to pull that 10 grand. Then at least you can say, well, this is in our like kind of framework, and under all of our like with our own standards and ethics for like how we want to pay artists and organizers, like this is what $10,000 a year gets us. Like that's an important thing, to be able to really see like Viva that already has this respect. It really excites me when like you say, okay, we have had this conversation about shutting it down, and then we had resistance within the community. That is actually such a way better scenario than people continuing to like hold on to their funding, and then this is what's happening in Toronto, and then like other centers being like, wow, that center really needs to die, like that, right? That's like the opposite problem that you're having. So if we already have this trust and faith in Viva, then we have to look at how Viva decides to sustain itself on $10,000. Then we actually get a real picture of like what our community standards are for what that is going to look like, you know?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I get what you're saying, and I think we will probably do the exercise of like what could it look like for $10,000. But I mean, at this point it's rolling because of personal investment, not just on my part, but a small group, you know, like the 20-80% thing I was saying earlier. And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, I have 2 jobs plus my work as an artist plus contract work, and it just gets to a point where I think we also, like, people get exhausted, and I think it's also something like ideologically or like abstractly it makes sense to say like we'll just scale back, but I think the reality of what it means to try to actually scale back, because at this point, like, the reason there's growth isn't because we're like, shit, we need to be a bigger festival. It's because people have gravitated with really exciting practices and really exciting projects that we want to support, and that won't go away even if we have to scale back. And I think from my experience not working just at Viva, but in artist-run culture in Montreal specifically in the past 10 years, has been very much that like we are our own worst enemies because we're excited about what we do and we're passionate about the work we're supporting, and we hate to say no to people. So we always find a way to make it work. And so I think theoretically there's this like, oh yeah, we'll just do 3 projects a year because that's all the money we have. But realistically, the amount of time we're solicited to participate in this debate or even things like this, or to support this project, or support this project, it just means it'll be like a festival of no's. So we'll spend our whole time saying like, yeah, sorry, we can't, we don't have money, yeah, sorry, we can't, we have no money. And in that sense, I feel like, you know, instead of, again, becoming this like, I don't know, like this space where like, okay, so this year we didn't do a call for submissions this year because we were at a point where we were getting over 200 applications and we were selecting like 5 of them. And I was like, that makes no sense. Like people are investing so much energy in generating projects and generating proposals. It's disproportionate. So we're going to shut it down. We'll do a different way of programming this year. It doesn't mean we'll not go back to calls, like we might do that, but I think I'm just like sensitive to this idea of like proportionality. And now I see that with the growth of the festival, like people solicit us, people contact us with really exciting shit all the time, and I already have to say no to quite a, like my job, to be totally honest with you, in this edition, 50% of it to date has been scaling back projects and saying no to stuff. And it's because I'm like, it just happened, like I just hired someone, our graphic communications thing is done with is going to be done with an artist collective, and they get to do an art project as part of it because we got money for communications. And I hate that it doesn't touch art practices, so we've integrated an artistic project within our communications budget, which is a public infiltration project. Anyways, they proposed something to me, which was awesome, and I seriously had to sit down with them and be like, guys, like this is so disproportionate to the amount of money we can actually give you and the amount of support we can actually give you.
Yeah.
Scale it back. But then I'm like, when my job is being a gatekeeper to make sure that people's investments match the resources we're able to give, that's just bananas, right? And there's like a disproportion, there's a huge gap between what the need is in the community and what we are, or collectively we are able to achieve or support. But I don't think by this, like, in some ways I do actually believe that like shutting down Viva and that name and that history, historicité, like that history, actually gives us more playing room to reinvent something that can be more impactful with $10,000. The legal problem is we can't actually shut down the festival format and maintain that $10,000. Like that $10,000 has us committed to a form that I don't even know if it would be possible to say like, yeah, keep giving us $10,000 and instead we'll be projects or meetings or whatever the fuck, a radio channel, like whatever the fuck we decide to do with it. I don't think we have that mobility is the problem. So in some ways it's easier for me to just say like, fuck it, and we start fresh than it is to, because then at least I know there's another $10,000 in the pool somewhere that I can access.
But you probably won't access that. Like realistically, you will not access that. And also, when you let go of operating money, that's a big deal. I don't know the situation for the Quebec Council, but the Ontario Council has been frozen for like 3. Pardon?
Municipal funds. It's like the city of Montreal.
Okay, sorry, city. So, but in like for Ontario, the council has been frozen for I think 4 years now. I'm not sure, maybe 3, and it probably will be frozen for like the next 5 years at least, based on their strategic planning thing that they announced last year. So, letting go of operational money is just. I just can't do it. I just think that like it's such a key resource, and really we don't know what's coming. We don't know what's coming down the pipes at any level of funding, municipal, provincial, federal. We don't know if like that there will be any new operational funding offered like in 5 years, for example. So I would say. The first step, I know that you think like, okay, I couldn't go back to the funder and say now it's a radio station, but honestly, I would try. I would just see, like, if that's the idea that like some kind of community-generated conversation comes up with for Viva. I think it's worth it saying to the funder like, this is what our version of a performance art festival now looks like. And it's not what your idea of a performance art festival is, but it's something. It's what people have said that they want. I don't know. But I really respect what you said about the proportionality and just like being sensitive to the amount of energy that people are putting into submissions or just like trying to access the resources that they think that VIVA has. I find like I just have that problem a lot too with Whippersnapper. But it's crazy, like when the need is so great on an organization, shouldn't that mean that it should be able to find its stability and other to meet that need? But I don't know. That's not
I kind of
one relation.
Kind of want to interject into this line of thought to draw out, like I'm just, so yeah, we're talking about funding and funding being cut, but actually Panoply, Grüntaler, and RATS9 are unfunded. And I think, I mean, TEENA, correct me if this is wrong, well, I think both of the spaces, from what I understand, are in a bit of a perilous position in terms of like making rent, but sometimes just barely, and that being a constant action. RATS9 does not make rent. We occasionally make rent, but basically run right now through the privilege of one of our people who is like topping up the rent each month, which she can't continue to do, and through the privilege that I don't pay rent at home, so that I have more time because I don't have to make money to pay my rent at home, so I program here. And this is kind of fucked up. And also kind of amazing, because when these conversations about funding happen, a lot of what I feel are the ways in which I see funding shaping what can happen. And I think VIVA is one of the resistances to that I see. But it's the same way in which, like, you know, writing submissions for art practice shapes what gets made. And so I kind of, like, love this. Anyway, I'm basically in the moment with my space, although I love looking at other spaces that are unfunded and find myself very inspired by the kind of works and the way that they can do making. I'm at the moment where I have to ask, okay, so either now I arrive RATS into a place that's self-sustaining, however that can happen, or not. And if it's not, I mean, it could pick itself up, but it's not really, it might just close, basically. And my politics are not letting me do that right now because it's the only queer mandated art space, anti-racist, queer, feminist mandated art space in Montreal. Although we have La Centrale, which is a feminist gallery, which is really amazing. But it's very different because it's been around for a long time. So I don't want to, I'm like, I don't want to let it go. But I'm kind of just wondering if, like, it's the moment where we decide whether we're moving towards this, like, funding stream, we're trying to get funding, or we take a stand and say, like, no, we're a DIY space, we don't have money, we have to run things through helping each other, this will become a community center space.
I think the parallels with the discussion of funding for VIVA are very interesting in that if you have to compromise, shut it down, right? That was like the coolest thing that I've heard. And I think that yeah. Oh man, TEENA, do you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I think we don't have to prove anything. That is something that you should really think about. Like, we don't have to preserve anything and we don't have to prove anything. We just have to be honest to ourselves. And just as an example, the Month of Performance Art Berlin, which has been running for 5 years, decided to quit. And we made that decision not because of the lack of funding, because there has never been any funding at Month of Performance Art.
Yeah.
which has been a for those who don't know, 5 years, a 1 month long platform full of performance art for a whole month. It's shitloads of work. And we had exactly 0 funding. So it was possible, and it was quality-wise, I would say it was okay. But then there was a very, very conscious decision to stop doing it and to think about new formats. So, I mean, there's many reasons for it, but the main reason is also that we all have our lives to live and we don't have to prove anything. So a lot of people moved on with their life, a lot of people felt like they don't want to participate anymore for several reasons, or people just say like, I can't do it anymore without payment, the usual stuff. And we also decided that format is not equivalent anymore. It's just not the right format anymore. And this kind of thing you have to seriously ask yourself. Like, is the space that I am paying rent for still the right space for me to do my work or to do my practice? Let's put it that way. And if you can honestly say no, then why should you continue? There's no reason to continue that. And quitting something doesn't mean quitting. It means starting something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really about like holding on to something that has been valuable and important for a couple of years or months or whatever. It means keep going with what you have to do in life. And if it's not happening in the same space anymore, then it will happen in another space. Or it will happen with other people, or it will happen even in another country. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you do it, just do it. And I'm in the same situation with my own space. I cannot quit at the moment because I cannot quit at the moment.
Why?
I'm not done yet. It's just I cannot explain that in a rational way, but I'm not done yet. Of course, I'm really fed up with the situation, obviously, because I am working my ass off, and I mean, next Wednesday is 1st of July, and I'm still missing half of the rent. But I will just find it. I don't know. Somehow it always worked. I always managed to get the rent together. I don't know how I did it.
Are you organizing alone?
Sorry, what?
Are you organizing alone?
Organizing alone? Sorry, did you say?
Are you, like, do you consider you to be running Grüntaler yourself? Are there other people who are running it with you?
No, it's basically just me because I decided not to exploit other people. So because I cannot pay anything, I cannot pay myself, I cannot pay the artist, I cannot pay anyone. So because I actually don't like to generalize, but in Berlin the situation of non-paid jobs or so-called internships, which are considered not to be paid here, has been going on for too long, and I don't want to be part of that system. So I decided that I am not going to ask other people to work with me or for me, but I'm just doing everything by myself, which means you can say I'm the boss of a company with one person, but on the other hand, it's basically I decide not to exploit other people. And I'm slowing down the program of the, what means slowing down? The program of Grüntaler 9 is not a regular thing. Whenever something happens, it happens. And whenever I'm not here or I don't have time or there is no proposal that I like, then there's nothing happening. That's what it is.
I respect that, like what you just said about I don't want to exploit other people. And I think when you asked me the question, that was like an instinct I had that, you know, we love the work we're doing and we love the work we're supporting and we're excited about it. And so we're willing to make compromises on an individual scale that I don't think are fair to translate on an institutional scale or to impose on other people. And so I think this idea that if you're willing to work and not get paid or invest yourself in something because you're getting some other alternative economy out of it, that's cool and that's legit. And you know, I have a whole practice of organizing spontaneous events or collective events independently where no one is paid and they're done without budget, and that's totally fine. But I think when those become institutional practices, and that becomes like a really fucked up riff because it's not consensual, right? Because for people to have to compromise or exploit themselves to be part of something they want to be a part of, it becomes a bit weird. And again, I can't speak to other contexts internationally because I don't know what it's like. But here I do think there are ways to try to access that funding or make it work without depending on internships. But I think, yeah, just like to invert that question, not just to think about like what is it that I want to get paid, because sometimes that isn't actually a fair answer to build from, but what is it that I want to pay other people, and what is it that's important for me to recognize, to not translate the same sort of practices we take on ourselves as institutional protocol, which, like at the end of the day, it comes down to like job security, right? Because like I can do this work and I can support these practices and you can have this space because you have a certain amount of privilege, whether it be financial or otherwise. But, if I had medical expenses or I had a family or I had anything else that made it such that and that's where the sort of like ethics of it become blurry for me. It's like to think that you can practice alternative cultural, or you can invest yourself in alternative cultural practices because you're in a space of privilege is like inherently a kind of fucked up thing. Yeah. Right? Like, but it's very true, and I think that's fine if it exists as a systemic reality, but if you're gonna translate that to institutional practices, like no fucking way.
But when do the things become institutional? That's the question. And also, I mean, TEENA, you point to not taking on an intern for the to not exploit other people, and I've also taken the position, I've been approached by a number of people asking me to give them internships, and I said no to everyone, except Josh arrived. He's currently the intern at RATS9 for the summer in Lincoln Pin, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't take unpaid interns, and he was like, no, I can get funding. So in fact, we got funding for Josh. He's the only person who's paid to work at RATS9. He's fantastic. But he's here for the summer. He, has a life, has another job, is going to go back into school, and I'm going to be here. And, I always take the stance to pay everyone before myself as an organizer, which I do somewhat believe in. If I have any money, it's always the artists first, then the documentarians, and then if there's people who are cooking and volunteering. And I have never made money from an event for myself. And it's okay. I'm in a privileged position where, actually also it's like somehow the only way I could deal with my guilt around not paying people, which is like maybe a little bit fucked up, but that's the way it is. But the question of like, then, of being like, are we exploiting the artists? Like, Kate Berry did a performance yesterday outside in front of the Musée d'Art Contemporain here, where she was rolling a golden gilded egg with her face. So it's like extremely laborious, like she's like, for hours bent down, and like her tights are torn up, she's sweating, everything's dripping. When this person came up who was quite concerned about Kate and was like, what are you doing? Are you doing this alone? Are you in a group? And Kate said, no, I'm with a group, like that's the director, and I was taking documentation for her. And the person that was talking to Kate was like, well, if she's the boss, why can't she do it? She's just taking pictures. And Kate was like, no, this is my work, it's copywritten, like, she's not allowed to do it, I will not allow her to do it. And I was like, well, no, I'll do it, like, okay, let's talk about this. And then there was like, almost this minor class riot going on, because these two people, like, two older women got involved and were like, we're concerned about you, like, are you being exploited? And Kate very clearly at the top of her lungs was like, I am not being exploited at all. I'm choosing to do this. I want to do this. And my response was, Kate, I think you are kind of being exploited. And she's like, no fucking way. I'm not being exploited. I have privilege. I'm choosing to do this. I have the time and the space to do this. Yeah. But this like self-exploiting, like, is that a thing? Is that a thing? Isn't that
it's a thing. It is a thing.
It's absolutely a thing.
We're all slightly masochistic.
I mean, I think.
But is it a problem? Sorry.
Go for it.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, but is it a problematic thing? As you pointed out rightly, Michelle, if you're in a place of privilege, to exploit yourself without undue harm to yourself, or at least that you can perceive, should you do it?
which is the socialist question about whether the kids who have money to pay for your class should pay, which, by the way, I think absolutely yes. You're pointing to the system, and you're going to have to navigate that. And it's going to be a shit show, and it's going to be really hard to navigate. But yes, kids who have the money to pay for the class should pay for their spot and the spot of someone else. And then you're going to have to deal with talking about that. But that's the real shit. Like, that's the way the world is working. So that's what's up.
We did that at an organization
Thanks, Adriana.
I worked in, and we had like sliding scales, and so people who were on like unemployment or not employed or artists could get in for free, and then people on this like trust system were allowed to pay what they felt was fair. And then we quickly realized that it was a huge fucking failure because everyone sees themselves as oppressed and poor, and you know, it's like a relative thing, and it was just crazy because everyone was like, I'm poor. You know, and I was like, yeah, but let's talk about what poverty is. Like, are you poor? Like, what is poor? And like, you know, and I don't know. Like, it's interesting because it's what am I trying to say? I think that it's complicated, right? Because we and I see this too because like, you know, like we're self-exploiting, let's say, and whatever.
Hate that.
But like, it's not, you know, like. Are we really self-exploiting? Like, I don't know. Like, you know, I'm yet to make $20,000 a year, and I thought the real salary was like my objective as a 35-year-old adult was like $35,000 a year. You know, which I probably never made.
Become a secretary.
Yeah, and then I talk to people, and they're like, oh no, like a starting salary is like $40,000. Like, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, so I'm totally like like I don't even know what a real fucking salary is, you know? But but I think so, you know, I see myself as privileged within a milieu I'm in, but at the same time, like, if I look at it socially in the larger scale of things, like, I am not the privileged. Like, you know, like the privileged is
sure,
like
the band.
Yeah, but no one, and then no one no one was like, you're right. I am privileged and I have a good income, so here's, you know, $100 for this week-long workshop. Like, not a fucking person did that. Everyone was like, oh no, I'm poor. $20.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm poor. Yeah. You know, like, so, because, and then who are you to be like, actually, no, your poverty, like, or your perspective of poverty does not count. So actually, we're going to give you, like $60 maybe, because, like, you can't do that. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. The second thought.
I like it though. I like it.
So maybe I'm sorry. Maybe I think the question of like, well, should you exploit yourself or not? Maybe is not really a fair question. I think
I'm still
what I was trying to ask was actually, Sorry.
No, nothing, Brian. Go ahead. You're an angel, and I'm not. Go ahead.
I was just asking, is when you're pushed against a wall and you don't want to compromise, what are the ways in which you can continue doing what you have to do? Because that does seem like the common struggle that we all share, perhaps because we're working in performance art. Perhaps because we're working in political art. Do you guys think, how involved do you think politics is in all of this? Like, have you seen your political stances reflected in the amount or lack of funding which you receive?
It's all about politics.
Yeah, but what are we talking about when we talk about politics?
No, everything. Like,
I guess I was posing the question. Of course, everything is political, but but I guess I meant in terms of.
I am not talking about. I am not talking about that everything is political, and I'm not talking about that every art is political. I am talking about what we are talking about now. I'm talking about actual lifestyles, actual decisions about our lives, about what we want to do and what we not want to do, about the decisions we are taking in our lives, and also about decisions we take in our lives according to our financial situations. It's all related to politics. One of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I think there has to be someone swimming against the stream. Because if we
Yes.
if we are all just conformists, and if we are all just doing the same shit like everyone else is doing because we are insecure or because we feel like we have to get a pension when we are old, then I'm sorry, then you can also just become a secretary. I mean, what's the point?
I think I'd like to be a secretary.
Sorry, what?
I think I'd like to be a secretary. I was recently so desperate that I started looking at job postings for law firms to be a phone receptionist. The starting salary was $40,000. I make about $100 a week right now. And I need much less qualifications than I have. And I wonder, but here's the thing, right? The reason that I point to that is that swimming against the stream is important. But you need resources in order to have that level of energy, because you have to swim 2-3 times as hard as you do if you're going with the stream, huh? If we're going with this metaphor. So my idea of, like, I don't trust grants right now in the granting system here, because I'm also seeing money pulled from the more radical, both politically and marginally, like marginal art, and like more explicitly feminist or queer work. And I don't fucking trust it, and I don't want to get involved in it because I don't trust it. Even if I agree with you that politically it needs to be this way. We give our taxes, the money needs to go somewhere that is aligned with where people want it to go, and we're some of those people. At the same time, I'm at a moment where I just think I should perhaps get a job in a law office, you know, wear a cute little suit, buy some nice shoes, flirt with my boss, and take that money and use it to pay performance artists.
Yeah. This goes to the core of my concern in Canada, which is I think we need good, fair-paying, salaried jobs for artists, which allow you to have flexible work, which allow you to have, because the reality is, like, as an artist or as a curator, as a cultural worker, whatever, you can't have a job like that. It just does not work. You can't do the other work you're doing. So the problem is that we can't access, and previously, Artist Run Culture was initiated as a space that created jobs for artists, right? So artists would have a job at a gallery that in the contract of your employment would say you have the rights to take a month off to go install your exhibition, you have the month to go do a residency, you can do it. But we're losing those jobs. Like, they're not going to us, they're not going to, or they're shutting them down. Anyways, but I am interested in this question you asked. Gosh, I see your face now and I can't see your name, Brian. About, like, you know, like, what do we need to do? And I think for me there's also this, like, confusion a bit between, like, what I think I want to do versus what I think the community, that I see the community needs to be done. And that's where the tension exists, because there's, like, there's only so much, you know, like, I'm fine being an under-recognized, underpaid artist. Like, I'm a feminist body art artist. That's the trajectory I'm aligned with.
No, you're one of the greatest artists I know, and you need to be known.
It's not about that. But I'm saying, like, but what drives me to do my work and what drives me to continue doing the work, not my art or my work as a culture worker, is not my need, but is a need from a larger community that I'm seeing is slipping through the cracks. And this idea of trying to support artists and practices who I am seeing actually not recognized in the dominant systems of dissemination because the work is too difficult, too radical, too long, too short, too crazy, too surprising, too whatever. And so I think, and I can't speak for all of you, but I would assume something else that we share is this kind of confusion between what it is we want to do or what we feel needs to be done and what we see a community that we're invested in needs, and trying to respond to that need in a semi-responsible way, right? And that's what sort of goes, that's what links us back to why it's difficult to close, right? Why it's difficult to shut down, why it would be difficult to shut down Viva is not because I won't have a shitty paying job that I don't live off anyways, or I won't have respect or recognition from my peer community, which, whatever. What's difficult about it is that I see the platform potentially as supporting a number of artists whose work I think have value and are interesting and deserve the opportunity to be given conditions of production that allow them to work to their full potential and share that work with the public, whatever that public is. So whether it's one person or 100 people, I don't really give a shit. But and that's where I think, yeah, it's all political, because we are definitely not getting grants because I don't play that game of writing something in the grant to just get the money and then spend it anywhere, because I think it's important in the grant that I be transparent about communicating what the real needs in the community are, and that I'm transparent about articulating that this isn't just like this fucking idea that I had and I'm like, this would be great, but that I'm like, no, actually there's artists working this way who are not being supported, who have works of value that need to find a public or an audience, and so it inherently becomes political, right? Because political ideologies or values are what shape what we prioritize in terms of funding. So here that tends to be a lot of the industry of culture, so things that are attracting tourism, or the development of new technologies. Montreal's a big video game industry, so if you stick a projector in it, you'll get money.
Yeah,
they should love that shit. Yeah, but then that means that artists who have really important practices that are rooted in the body, that are rooted in here and the now, are getting lost. And those are the practices for me that are the most exciting, that are actually transforming the current landscape of art practitioners the most, and I think those deserve to be recognized and supported, or they'll stop making work, right? Because at the end of the day,
do you communicate all these things also to the people that are sitting in the politics and actually deciding on this, or do you just talk to other artists about this?
So in Canada, we have like representative organizations, like we have these bodies. Institutional bodies that are supposed to represent the funders, or to the larger government institutions, and I am quite vocal with them. I paid $270 to be a member of one of these organizations, which is a huge investment for VIVA, so that we can have a voice and that we can use that, and it's having an effect. So, for instance, like now we've started to have a network of performance like to support performance work in Canada, and we just concretely made a request to CARFAC, which is the body that establishes artist fees for not just artists and speakers, but museums and galleries across Canada. And we just sent them a letter saying that we felt that the performance fees were undervalued and that the language was dated, et cetera, et cetera. And as a consequence, in the 2016 to 2018 fee schedule, they are going to be taking into account our criticism and concerns and shifting that. So we are sort of, but that doubles the work. So we're doing the festival, but then a big part of our work now, since I've been here, is also being sort of advocates for performance artists or performance practices to exactly what you just said, communicate with larger bodies of power what the needs are in the community and how to best support what are actual needs within the framework of the structure that they're providing. But that's a lot of work too, right? Because those are long-winded, like lobbying work, fucking slow and boring, but it's important. Like the bongos.
Bongos?
The jump kit. Do you have a cat sound? Silence.
TEENA, what were your hopes, or I guess, like, what was your trajectory in asking about that? Like, is that something that you try to do from where you're at in Berlin? And if so, do you see any results coming from that, or is it not part of your strategy?
I think it has to be done because you know, we can do this kind of talks that we are doing now over and over again, but it's not going to change anything if we do not contact the people who are actually in the position to change the situation. So what is happening in Berlin since a couple of years is that There's something called the Free Coalition, which is a coalition or kind of a loose platform that has been founded for independent artists and everyone that is dealing with so-called independent art in Berlin, which is a huge number of people, including all kinds of artists, dancers, curators, project space runners, and who knows what. And they are all in the same situation like I am. Like, we are all non-funded, some of them doing some shitty jobs, the usual situation, or you just basically exploit each other. They are buying beer at my space, I'm buying beer at their space, and that's the end of the story. So what's happening since a couple of years is that some people who are actually willing to take the burden to have continuous conversations happening with the politicians and lobbyists and whoever is sitting there in the cultural senate of Berlin, of Germany, of whatever, they are trying to persuade them or to make it clear to them what the real situation is about. Because let's say approximately 5% of the artists living in Berlin can actually live off the art, which is probably pretty much the same worldwide. And what is happening at the moment is that slowly things are changing, not necessarily to the better, but they are changing, and there's actually people who are keeping up with the changes. Like, they know what's actually going on in the lawmaking, in the let's say city tax distribution, etc., etc. All these kind of things that nobody really wants to know or cares about or follows up, because we have other things to do to keep paying our rent. And they inform people, they gather people, they inform people, they ask for, oh, you have to come to that particular kind of parliamentary meeting, because it's important that we show up there. And since this is happening, a few things have changed. For example, the project space has been started, as I mentioned before, since about 2 or 3 years. We have the project space happening, and this is already a little step. Just now, about 2 weeks ago, there was a new email going around that they actually managed, like these people of the so-called Free Coalition that I'm talking about, they actually managed to force the city of Berlin out of a profit that they made from a new tourism tax that comes in since a couple of years, which is a lot of money, because there's a lot of tourism going on here. So there's about 14 million city tax happening at the moment, increasing. And this 14 million was actually supposed to go completely to the arts and to culture. But then Berlin claimed, oh, we are such a poor city, we can't do this anymore, we are sorry, we have to change our mind. So all of a sudden, overnight, they decided, no, the city tax cannot go to the arts anymore, as we promised, we have to give it to someone else. So, for example, to the airport that has been built and is not running until now. I don't know if you guys know about that, but there's a completely new airport that has been built.
Another airport? Third one?
Yes, it's completely fresh, new, big, large, fancy airport in the south of Berlin. It is completely finished, and it's not running. It's just an empty building. And I'm actually honestly thinking about...
Go do performance there.
That's where you should do performance.
I'm honestly thinking about occupying it, because I think this space is already performative. Because there's actually people working in that space, and they're getting paid for working in that empty, non-functioning airport just to keep the building alive until the politicians agree on what they want to do with that building. So it's a really weird situation there. There's like trains going through the tunnel of the airport back and forth to keep the air condition running. I mean, just think about that. It's a performance. I mean, there's trains going back and forth with no people in it just to keep the air condition running for an airport that's not working. Just think about that. And they're getting paid for that job. And anyhow, so this free coalition managed to put as much pressure on the situation that 1.4 million out of that 14 is actually going to artists now. They decided that 2 weeks ago. So now all the artists of Berlin have 2 weeks to apply for a so-called research stipend that they can get of 8,000 euro each, and about maybe I don't know, 50 people will get it. So it's, I don't know what's the saying in English, but in German we would say it's a drop on a hot stone. But anyhow, I just wanted to make it clear that it's important to work on it, and that one should really honestly think about where the beginning of the problem actually lies. Because, as I said at the beginning, we can talk about this kind of problems over and over again, and we can make decisions for ourselves. Oh, there's a new face. No.
Maggie, just wait.
I just moved. Oh,
you just moved. You look different. That's funny. With a completely different background, it's a different person.
The more
cool.
But okay.
Yes. Sorry, I'm finished.
No. It's I think it's really interesting and really apt. I just wanted to do a check-in on timelines for people because we haven't really talked about that, and I want people to feel like comfortable to be able to assert their timeline needs. I know Michelle has to go to a wedding in like 20 minutes. I have
to go to a wedding. What?
Not me. Michelle has to go to a wedding in 20 minutes, I think.
Okay. And what's wrong with you guys?
I know.
Why are you married?
It's really not efficient, marriage.
It's so oppressive.
People have to go to the wedding.
Now letting the heteronormative gays marry. Oh.
I'm okay for time. I can keep talking, and I think like it's
so good.
It's interesting to have this combo of people, but I also don't have to go like I think going all night is also not a reasonable option. So
I love durational work. Brian, where are you at?
What?
Oh, frozen, Brian? Yeah. Brian.
The life of Brian.
Hey, sorry. I got cut off.
It's okay. We were just wondering what your timeline is like, just to check it.
Well, I got up this morning and I played piano at a church, and then I had rehearsal. So I've been running around since 9 a.m. So I would like to eat at some point, but other than that, I don't have a specific time constraint now that I'm here.
Okay, so do you?
Well, I was actually eating when we started the conversation about 3 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel comfortable to assert when you need to go, Brian? Is that okay?
Yes, I feel comfortable asserting when I need to go. The conversation lasts until 8 p.m., yeah?
Sure.
Oh, so this could just go on forever.
Yeah. TEENA, but it's late for you.
Into how many more hours?
Pardon?
I need a time translation.
Say it again.
How much longer?
For immer.
Let's just make up an amount of time right now. How much time would you want to go? How much? Like this? Yeah, I don't understand the hour translation either. But how much time would you want to go?
No. What I meant with time translation was Brian was saying we can go on until 8 o'clock, but 8 o'clock is already done for me since 4 hours.
2 a.m.
Right. That's 2 hours from now.
It's 2 a.m.
2 hours from now. Okay, I think I need to go sleep at some point.
Yeah. That's too much time. That's too much time.
For me, it's already Monday.
Yeah.
about a half an hour?
So what's your timeline? What's the time frame for you, TEENA?
I have no time frame. Time is the only thing we have. We poor people.
And barely. How about half an hour or 45 minutes?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great. Was that? Did you just do a sound effect answer? Great.
Is it a glockenspiel?
Brian has all of
no.
Send it out. Everything crumbles. I love it.
I had a rehearsal. I'm sorry. I feel like we were getting somewhere for a little while there.
Sorry. Okay, I have maybe like a small thing just to build on what TEENA was saying, which is that talking to the politicians is not usually my deal, and I guess it would be nice to have things like art service organizations, as Michelle was saying, to do that, although it doesn't seem that they are being very effective at it right now. And also, it's hard when art service organizations rely on government funding, because I feel like, that has all kinds of conflicts of interest. What is going on?
I messed everything up. I'm sorry.
I love it. It's great. Okay, just one thing. I love the Coalition of the Independent Scene and everything that they're doing in Berlin. I think it's amazing. But the other reason that it's kind of important to have a body who are paying attention to shit or not paying attention.
Absolutely.
No. The reason that it is important to have a body paying attention, just an example, I'm thinking of Buenos Aires, and it's too bad that Eva and Juan aren't here, but something happened a few years ago where there was a fire in an independent arts facility, and what happened from that is that there was a law change, and basically Buenos Aires, a massive city that's full of so many independently run spaces, had a huge portion of those were shut down by these new municipal regulations. So all of these spaces, all of these people who had put so much work, had spent so much time amassing resources, they basically, it was taken out from under their feet. And, people started to organize, and obviously you can't always see something like that coming, but it really had an impact on the overall art scene there. So that's just an example where, okay, that became an impetus to organize, and I'm sure that we are always semi-organized, right? We're currently just talking to each other right now, but having some people who are willing to put the labor and time into just...
Yeah, and like you said, I think there's something important about people who are paying attention to that sort of level of political activity, because most of us are invested in our day-to-day and our communities, and we don't have time for that. And just to sort of evoke, there's something interesting that happened. I think you had mentioned there's a $2.5 million cut that just happened to the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec, which is the provincial funding body for culture. And it's interesting because everyone was panic, but it's kind of strategic, because what they've decided to cut to are service organizations, and what is included in service organizations are these representative bodies. And so, for instance, we have the RCAA, which is a sort of grouping or coalition of artisan centers in Quebec, and they are going to be cut. In the past year, they've already laid off 5 staff, and they're going to have to continue based on this cut that was just recently announced. But it's interesting because, by eroding, I feel like there's something strategic about this idea of eroding the structures or the services that are paying attention to what's happening in terms of funding in governments, and are trying to be the bridge. And even so, it's also interesting because I'm going to do a little, we have one viewer now, but a little RCAQ blast, because it's interesting because they announced the cut on Tuesday, and the RCAQ will probably have to cut staff as a result of that directly again. And they have not taken position against this in any solid or valid form. And so it's interesting because the organizations that are supposed to represent us politically in some ways are also not as radical maybe as they should be, and this is just demonstrated locally by the fact that they are experiencing a series of cuts. And instead of reacting to them in a political way or to use it as a platform to why it's important to support culture and how this is actually going to in the end affect artists directly, have taken a stance of like a bit more like passivity or silence, or like let's not shake the waters kind of a thing. And that's always sort of surprising for me because, yeah, on the one level, like you want to have that level of a sort of like organization or a collective or someone who is like paying attention to what's happening. But at the same time, I don't know, like I have this, oh God, bear with me, I'm going to have like a second glass of wine distancing discussion, but it's sort of like the feminist CEO, you know, like we talk a lot about, like I work at the job that pays my bills is at a university, at a feminist artist, or feminist institution, research institute, and every year in March for International Women's Day, we get these people who are like, oh, we're having this great feminist event about the CEO of whatever private security firm or whatever, you know, and it's just kind of like, I don't give a shit how much you self-identify as a feminist. Like, if you are the CEO of a, like, major conglomerate, I don't know, private security firm, like, you are not a feminist anymore. And so I also wonder, like, the strategy in terms of, like, yeah, dialoguing with the politics, or making sure there's bridges between what we're doing on a local or grassroots or community level with what's happening politically. Bridging that is like a fucked up thing, because I feel like inherently the people who make it to this space of being able to sort of like play that game of hey, are inherently maybe like the lesser of the radical people. And like, how do you negotiate? Yeah. How do you make sure that that these yeah, I don't know.
No, I think that's a good point, and I think it brings up something that I always console myself when receiving rejection letters or just when failing in certain situations, is that, well, if people with whom I disagree with politically do not support my work, then I must be doing the right thing.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So do you guys think that that's, do you identify, I mean, obviously, it seems like we must all identify with that sentiment, but some of you are receiving, do any of you receive funds from people who you find morally objectionable, or do any organizations you've worked with in the past, have they ever ended up in this moral quandary?
We had, like, we were doing this project where we were talking to different organizations about the way that they, yeah, just like whatever, funding strategies or scaling strategies. And one person was like, you should definitely get money from the condo developers who are revitalizing this like social housing neighborhood across the street, that are going to take what is now like a public asset and turn it into a half public asset, a half private development thing. They're like, you need to tap into that money. If you don't tap into that money, you're an idiot. I was like, well,
right.
If we tapped into that money, we would be 100% like exploiting people around us, like basically exploiting like our neighbors. That's what we would be doing, and we would also be alienating our neighbors. And we do have a very invested relationship with like a lot of groups and organizations in the neighborhood, so we would never do that. Like, that just doesn't make sense. But anyway, so that was like maybe one way that I saw that potentially going.
Yeah, and also because like that becomes a compromise, right? Like this idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's why in the granting process, I'm so adamant about being honest and transparent about what we're going to do with the funds, and why for us it's meaningful and important is because like, as long as we're sort of like trying to subtly circumvent something from one space to another, like, you know, we're accessing funds, we're going to do something different in it, we're still supporting a funding structure that we disagree with and that we don't feel is responding to the needs in the community. And I push it further to think that we have a sort of advantage as an arts organization and not as an individual artist to play a bit more resistance, whereas it's definite that the realities that we face as an organization dedicated to performance or art action practices trickles down to the reality of actually practicing artists who maybe don't have the same sort of agency or potential or power to resist or push back against those systems. So I would never criticize, I think, an individual artist for playing the game, kind of. Like, you know, you do what you need as an individual to hustle. But again, like, as an institution, I think we have a certain responsibility to try to resist these sort of shifts in cultural trends, to be able to create space, quote, like, underneath us for artists who are practicing, who are facing similar struggles, but that don't have the same sort of, like, agency, or I'm gonna say, like, power, that's not the right word, but maybe pull. So, for instance, like, we have a lot of pressure, just like a very basic example to make this concrete for you, a lot of pressure to shift and to generate video documentation of what we're doing.
Oh yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and we've been, one of the major criticisms from juries is that we don't generate documentation because they don't understand what the artists are doing with their video, which is a bullshit argument. And also to ask artists to give you video when they're not confirmed with the programming, because if you don't get the funding, they can't be part of it. Anyways, so ethically, I'm like, no video, just photos or past projects we've done. And it's interesting because as an artist, I've gotten the exact same feedback. So I got an artist grant once, and someone who's on the jury came to see me and was like, "You are never going to get a grant again if you submit video." And I was like, fuck, man, like, there's a whole bunch of performance or live art practices that can't actually be captured in video documentation. And so why are we privileging this sort of trend in the granting system? And so, again, like, I feel like as an institution, the resistance that we can exercise is a bit more strategic in hopes that our resistance will eventually create space for individual artists, or for the system to change a bit that is the same, which is the resistance I don't think individual artists can or should be expected to do. And so I think it's a bit of that pull and play. And that resistance can, again, be the same thing with Ubisoft is a video game company that moved to Mile End a number of years ago, and they were funding, like, crazy local culture events, and there was 2 spaces that refused to take their funding, and they were like, no, man, they fucking put a whole bunch of money in the development of, like, a war, what's that called? Fake.
A war?
No, it's like, no, they fund, like, CGI stuff for war.
Ah,
like,
yeah,
you know,
like a war simulation.
Yeah. And so the feminist space is like, no fucking way we are associating with that, but it's because it becomes, like, I think as an institution we also have, you know, I think a lot about, like, our responsibility and our responsibility to the community, and that goes beyond just supporting the practices and the artists, but also, I think, advocating and resisting where I think we have a bit more pressure or potential than individuals do. So congrats on not taking that money, Whippersnapper.
I mean, Whippersnapper, this is a very competitive family, mandated and rightly so, to be in relation to your neighborhood, and your neighborhood is a specific neighborhood. RATS9 is in an arts building that is in an area that is profoundly spectacularized via the city. The city gets a lot of tourism money through pumping money into this area to fund art, and that's mixed with, like, a number of, like, sex clubs and, like, shitty souvenir shops that are left over from when this was the red light district, but also, like, where we, like, kind of edge those 2 spaces. This building has a number of commercial galleries, a handful of artist-run centers, and then a couple, like, dance studios. And in fact, I find it to be not a radical space. That's my feeling of it. Simply.
What, rats or the overall?
The overall sensation of the building as a whole.
The context.
The context. Like, the building in the neighborhood that we're in, the building is mobilized towards these certain ways that the city is doing spectacularized arts funding. But, okay, so last month, no, before I came to Berlin, I took a decision, fuck it, if I'm going to get money, we're going to get it however we're going to get it. In the bottom of the building, there's an amazing fabric shop that was shut down, and then this, like, cafe and dépanneur to open an RBC bank. as soon as the bank began doing construction, they started doing construction on the facade of the building to get up to code. The construction on the facade of the building meant that I couldn't work in the space because it was so loud for a number of weeks. The yoga studios in the building, you know, were like, this is a yoga studio, like
It's so not zen.
but like we can't actually do our work, and that's legit. That's totally legit. And they've poured so much money into that space, like they can't just pick up and move somewhere else simply. So, anyway, I started looking up. I am at a moment where I'm like, yeah, private investors, I'm in. Because for me, it's the question that TEENA brought up before, which is a systemic question. It's a question of where the foundational concern lies, the foundational issue or tension. Either we are separatists, we start our commune, we find a different way of doing things, which, guys, I'm totally fucking in for. I'm totally in. But you're not out of the system. You're still in relation and
I'm
out
more
of
like
the
a
system.
mutiny kind of person. Like
I
take
know you
over
are.
another system.
I know. But if we're going to take over the system, then I think we have to drain the resources of that system and put them towards where we want them to be. I wouldn't, in the case of Whippersnapper, have taken that money. Like, this makes perfect sense for me. In my situation, though, I'm like, RBC should be giving me money. RBC should be giving me $2.5 million. It's just a drop on a hot rock for them. And I'm ready to take that money and run with it and do, like, microgrants for the queers who can't make rent that month. Okay, you're an artist, and, like, no, I'm not giving you money to make your arts practice. We're giving you money to have food. Like, I think we ride a weird line when we have these ethical questions of where the money's coming from, because I think that Canada itself is so entangled in these, like, really problematic, especially war-related activities. It's hard for me to view Canadian dollars as different in a real political way than the developer dollars. I know we feel them differently. I know in a direct moment they're different, but on a larger level, they feel very similar. What do you guys think about that?
Well, and it's interesting because I think this brings up the question of, well, I'm not going to connect it to an earlier discussion, but it does. I think this brings up the question of the dichotomy between self and community. For example, if you have a community of artists who are constantly making work and who respect each other's work and respect each other, it's possible then that that community could sustain itself without some kind of overarching organization or some kind of overarching funding structure. And I say this because I've seen it happen at MPAB in Berlin, the Month of Performance Art Berlin. I've seen it happen here, where we've been working in that way for some time. And I guess I'm wondering if you guys in Canada see that as a problematic. See that as, no, asking artists to contribute to the organization of their own community or to work alongside organizers or work as organizers, is that somehow problematic? Does this somehow not fit into your view of the artist's role in society if such a thing exists, which probably doesn't?
I think that that's great, and I think that that's kind of like theoretically the base of the artist-run center system that we have. But I think that we have to be real that that's like a really narrow scope of who is able to participate in that way. And so
absolutely.
I think that just like part of this is not it's that there have to, like, it's a good thing that there are so many different strategies, like different ways of approaching arts and arts organizing that like are happening, and I think it's really important that you know, RATS9, I think it's great that RATS exists, right? Like, I think it's that you are creating a space, and it's not a space that everybody is going to participate in. It's a space that, like, people will find out in the certain specific ways that they'll find out about it, and it will, like, build, there will, a culture, like, will build around it, or is building around it. And I think that we should also, in the same way that, I don't know what you said, Adriana, something about like drain the system or whatever.
Suck all the money and resources from the system to use them for our own means.
Yeah, like let's use the resources. Let's use them, like really, really use them, and not like stretch them. That's, I think, a delicate balance. But this is maybe a tangent, but I think that going back to your question of like, should you take a 40K secretary job that you can totally just do? I think it's an interesting question. It's like, what somebody said to me at a conference like a month ago or something. They were like, I cannot support the arts, and not like just money wise, but like I'm a bad arts supporter in the position that I'm in my life, financially, like time wise. I can't contribute anything because they were just like drained in all ways, drained of their drained emotionally, drained financially, no time. So there. I think that having a stable job outside the arts is a really good thing, and more people should consider doing that. Yeah. And that will be a way to like return some money in and whatever. I don't know. That's a different place than I guess my thoughts started with your question, Brian. But I think I think that it does relate to what we expect of each other as like co-organizers, co-supporters of each other's lives and practices and stuff. And also I do think a lot about like public funding and what the where it should go, and I think about who's not tapping into that. Like there's so much going on in Toronto. The span of like arts activities is huge, but what is considered like contemporary visual art is like tiny, and then funded within that even smaller. So I think about that a lot. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where I get enraged a little bit, because like I'm definitely someone who's like, I'm critical, but I'm not judgmental, and so for me, I think whatever approach institution, a space, a collective needs to embody to achieve the means of what they're trying to do, fuck yeah, go for it, you know? I'm not going to judge that at all, especially not in contexts other than the ones that I am in and I can speak to. But that being said, like within I think my position is very much informed that within my own environment or milieu, like I see a lot of shit being funded that for me is not representative of what's important in culture in Canada or in Quebec or locally. And for me, it's this idea of like, if we are going to be investing public tax dollars in a really serious way into the development of cultural practices, I want it to go towards practices that are actually having a real impact on the ground level and that aren't appealing to this larger agenda of industry or tourism, because at the end of the day, if there's one way we're going to ensure that our cultural practices are stagnant and therefore irrelevant, it's by not funding what's actually happening like in the communities, like the work that's difficult, the work that's challenging, the work that's asking important questions, that's requiring spaces and platforms to change and evolve. Like that's not like, we use these words like innovation and all this kind of like bullshit, but I think it's so much linked right now to industry, and I think for me, my rage or my position is very much informed by this idea of like, there is fucking money out there in Canada, and that money, like you said, is going to this very specific niche, and as a taxpayer in Canada whose money goes to a lot of shit I don't believe in, like war, like military, I demand that some of my money goes towards social services, and that includes culture. And in the culture, as someone who's in it, I think we should entrust people in the community to define what practices, what work, and what disciplines or undisciplined approaches to art making should be invested in to ensure that the cultural practices that we have here in Quebec, Canada, or at a larger scale remain relevant, remain productive, and remain critical, so that they ensure that culture actually has a purpose and it doesn't just become this like entertainment or this, you know what I mean? Like that, I think this idea of like, what is the artist's role in society is something someone had brought this up way earlier in the conversation, like 2-3 hours ago, but like, this is something that I actually think about a lot. And the issue I have within the Canadian system is that I feel like the artists who are really critical about what the role of having, like what it means to be an artist in the 21st contemporary society, are not the ones who are being supported. Like, they're actually the ones who are being silenced, that are being shut down, that are being unsupported, that are being unfunded. And my project is to try to change that, because, like, we've developed this really precious system here, and people have fought for this system, and people have worked hard at ensuring the sustainability of this system, and it's being eroded and all that kind of shit. But I don't even care about the erosion of the system. I don't even care that there's less money in it. But I want it to be going towards practices that, as someone who spent 10 years invested in a community of contemporary art, that those people are, like, the practices that I see actually making an impact on the community are the ones that are being supported. And that's not the case at all. And that's where I become, like, a bit more radical or difficult in this context, because I'm like, fuck it. Like, you don't get to define, like, you sitting in your cubicle, like, you don't get to define what culture is. Like, you let us define that, because we're the ones doing it. But if you don't have that funding structure at the end of the day, like, you do what you fucking need to hustle. Like, that makes sense. And I think a lot of my position is informed by this access that we have here that I think is being really misused, and that's I'm going to leave right now. So my mutiny hat is like, why are we reinventing the wheel all the time? Like, we have people around us and before us who have fought, especially in Canada, to implement a system of support that is being strategically co-opted by the government to respond to agendas other than what the cultural agenda really is. And that's where I'm like, no. Like, I pay fucking taxes, and I'm cool with my money going to a bunch of shit I don't believe in, but at the end of the day, it's going to go to art. It's going to go to art that I think is important, and not I, like me individually, but I as someone who's invested in a community, who's on the ground, who's in the field, who's with the people, and who can actually assess the impacts of artistic practice more than someone sitting in a cubicle filling out forms or checking surveys can. That's it.
I think you should totally go into politics.
That's a mic drop, Michelle.
Do you know that here, the intersection, there's like la ministre de la culture and...
You already talk like one.
So,
wait a minute. So, I think for me, the culmination of this meeting is an election in which I vote Michelle to be the political representative of performance art in Montreal. And I'm just going to start putting that out there and see if it's possible.
I want that responsibility.
Yeah, but we need to.
Anyway, I have to go, Cats, because I have a prior engagement that needs a better outfit than this. It's okay. And I have to bike there, so I need a rain suitable outfit is what it is. But,
nice to hear from you, Michelle.
Wonderful meeting all of you. Thank you so much. Whippersnapper, I've been following what you've been doing for a while now already, actually, and I've seen the transition from the previous model to this model, so keep it up. Grunter, I can't pronounce the name, or Gruntaler.
Well, I can't say it.
Keep it up. I look forward to more information about what you're doing. I'm really inspired by your really solid position. Panoply, it is my dream to come see you in New York, even though I have an adverse physical reaction to the city of New York.
I understand.
I've had the worst moments of my life in New York. So, I will try.
Me too.
Oh, too, I know, it's a city of dreams and possibilities. But it's geographically close, and actually my really close friends in Boston have left, so maybe now I might have to navigate back to New York instead. So I will.
Let us know if we can give you a letter with our letterhead on it till you can get some funding to come.
So you don't have to letter for the fun of it. You can just be like, hey, like maybe we just need to send each other like motivational letters of awesomeness, like. Oh, you're doing great! Keep it up!
Yes!
So I'm going to run off, but amazing, and I think because of ADRIANA, you have my email, so feel free to follow up with anything relevant or even irrelevant. It doesn't matter.
Nice to meet you, Michelle.
Have a good
everybody.
Engagement.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye, dear. You have a...
Can I donate the rest of those cherries?
Oui, mais I have a bunch of cherries, so if you'll eat them, you can take them. But if you want to donate them, then...
Is somebody going to be here in the next couple of days?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'll leave them here. Yeah. Okay. I feel that I'm not helping with this.
Oh, gosh, no.
I ran out of wine.
Here, have some of this.
Oh, TEENA!
Not very
That's a problem.
to it.
Finito.
That's why you had to play with the glass. Is this Is this the end? My only friend, the end?
It might be.
Yeah, it's close to it. I'm so glad that Michelle was here for a while, because I feel like I'm working in a, and maybe you feel this way too, Tina, and maybe everybody else. I feel like I'm working in a space where the co-option of political models to support artistic and cultural practices has already been co-opted. That's already happened, and that the system is incredibly corrupt and impossible to breach in a way that can sustain one's own political goals. So it's really good to hear from somebody who still believes.
She's a believer. She's
a believer.
Yeah, importantly so. Do you guys have
Definitely.
any? I do. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts / things that you think are important to address, or that you want to point to, or songs you want to sing, or anything like that?
Well, Maggie, I'm really interested in.
Oh,
He's frozen. He's a frozen. He's a frozen.
Brian.
Maggie, he's really interested in.
It's something.
Wait.
It's being spoken. It is being spoken right now. But.
No. Listen. Wait. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Okay. So, I take over.
Tell me.
Maggie. Oh, wait. I have to speak a bit darker.
Yeah.
Let me think. No, I cannot do the American accent. I'm sorry. I am really interested in. What would he ask now? What do you do with the $9,500 per year?
Yeah. Good.
Our rent is $9,600 per year.
So what?
Our rent, our space, our rent.
Yeah.
Is $9,600 per year.
Whoa, how much is it per month?
Oh, here we go. Yeah. Yes, I can understand that. Yeah. But it's
that's how we think about it. It's a pretty one-to-one. But if we, for example, everything failed and we lost every other aspect of funding that we had, and that was the only core funding that we had, we would let go of the space. This is basically the plan. We would let go of the space and have like one curatorial like small project hired, and that person would probably receive a salary of about, I don't know, maybe like $6,000 or $7,000, and they would spend all of that time fundraising to get a little bit more money. Maybe that would fail, but even if it did fail, they would have about $3,000 to put on to pay some artists to do a thing. So it would be like they would have some money to try very hard. They would have a bit of funding to like do the yearly accounting. And anyway, so that's one way that we've thought about what would that look like. Yeah. Brian just disappeared. He's just gone.
I sent him an invitation to come back, but I'm not. Let me just check.
No, I think he mentioned a bit earlier that.
Here's his question. Tina, put your beard on.
I am.
See the line, okay? I got kicked off. Maggie, I would love to hear more about Whippersnapper and the way in which it engages activist practices and agendas.
Exactly.
Should I talk about that now?
Yeah. If you feel weird, we don't have to. Are we call it quits too?
I'm just wondering, like, what he knows to ask that question. But
that might be secondhand from me talking about how great you are when I was there last week.
Oh, that's nice.
But actually, I think it's interesting because, in fact, it came out of my mouth like, I think Maggie's one of the few people, maybe one of the only people whom I know who is.
That is what Brian would do. That is what Brian would do. Brian would do.
an arts like organizer / curator, but whom I actually understand to be an activist doing activism through that work. I think a lot of people talk about that. I think a lot of people are doing activism on the level of the individual communities, on the funding level, but I see your work as actual anti-oppressive work. And that's not like localized only to Whippersnapper, but it's specific for me to the way that I see you do your practice, and it's really fucking inspiring. So I think I probably said that to him.
That's
and
nice.
That's where it's coming from.
That is a nice thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that I do. One of the things that I was stepping back from some other like activist organizing stuff that I'd been involved with for a few years. I have like stepped back in the last year and am in and out when I happen to have time. But I've been thinking about that prioritization. One of the things, Adriana, that I said when you left the conversation, but after our first chat, when you were talking about like, I'm able to do this work because I have I'm able to do a lot of unpaid work because, you know, rent at home is covered by my partner. And I thought if I had, if I didn't have to worry about like any kind of like my financial well-being at all, I would not be doing Whippersnapper. Like that wouldn't be the first thing that I would think to do. Yeah. Not even close. But I think that I have decided to spend a lot of energy on this because I realize I can be effective within it, and that there's a lot that I can do with other people. I think that that's really important. Like there is like a collection of people now that I feel are giving me a lot back. So that's one thing. But yeah, it's just I'm more effective working within Whippersnapper, thinking about what that form could be for a whole like slew of different versions, parts of the arts community that are in and around Toronto. Yeah, I'm like way more effective at that than I am as like a mining solidarity, like anti-mining solidarity activist.
Yeah.
For example, I'm way more effective at the Earth Admin thing. But
is that because of the position you've been given though?
Well, I didn't really. I was like, I took this position. Yeah. Like I took it for sure. I guess I am really grateful to the two people who were organizing before who had like basically called me in and said, you know, let's talk about like they were asking different people in the arts community for feedback, and I gave them feedback, and they were like, would you like to now help make your feedback reality? And I was like, yes. So, but in terms of where it is now, like that's not being given, but definitely taking it up somehow. Yeah. So, but I think what you said about like power and having that weird perception of people when they like think that you have a lot of power to make decisions. I think you do, like we do. We really do, actually. So that's important to recognize. Yeah.
Nice, thanks. I just want to let you know that Brian like is not able to get back on, but he says thanks for the talk. And yeah, nice things. Maybe it's the moment?
I think it's the moment.
Okay. I'm going to officially stop the broadcast.
Okay.
To our one viewer.
Bye, broadcast viewer.
I'm really blown away, and I wonder who you are. Tschüss.